Welcome to Note Lab Mode. Today, we're embarking on a deep dive into a topic that, honestly, it feels like it's straight out of science fiction, but it's very much our reality right now. We're talking about the huge and, rapidly changing role of artificial intelligence in modern conflict. Specifically, our research unpacks how it's being used in the ongoing situation between Israel and Iran. And the United States is definitely a key player in this, too. We've pulled together some really illuminating research. It doesn't just show how AI is fundamentally transforming military operations, but it also explores some pretty surprising uses in humanitarian efforts right in the middle of these conflict zones. So get ready for some maybe aha moments. This is definitely going to challenge how you think about war and tech today. Okay, but before we get into all that, just a quick word from our sponsor, CloutFit.ai. Imagine if you could connect influencer outfits, like the ones you see online, directly to your store's inventory, so people can shop right from that content. Well, that's exactly what CloutFit.ai does. It helps drive more sales, higher order value. Pretty neat stuff. You can check them out at CloutFit.ai. Let me spell that for you. CloutFit.ai. Go see what they're about. Okay, so let's set the scene here. Our research paints the Israel-Iran situation as, well, more than just another conflict. It calls it a defining case study for, 21st century warfare, maybe even the first large-scale use of AI in actual combat operations. So what makes this such a big shift? How is AI going beyond just, smarter bombs or drones?
Well, what's really striking, I think, is how fundamentally AI is reshaping the entire operational picture. And not just for one side, but for, well, everyone involved. It's not just an add-on anymore. It's integrated right into the core, into decision-making, into how operations are carried out. It marks a really significant shift in international security. We're talking about intelligence systems, not just weapons.
That's a really important distinction. So integrated into the core. Let's dig into that, starting with Israel. The research points to some really advanced AI systems they're using. Some sound quite futuristic, maybe even unsettling. Can you walk us through systems like Gospel, Lavender, and Where's Daddy? What do they actually do?
Sure. So Gospel is a good example of this massive leap in processing intelligence. It automatically scans huge amounts of surveillance data. We're talking video feeds, drone footage, signals, and it identifies potential targets, buildings, equipment, even people suspected of being enemy forces. Then it gives targeting recommendations to human analysts. But the speed is just, well, it's astonishing. The research says what used to take 20 officers, 250 days to find maybe 250 targets. Gospel can do that in about a week.
Wow, 1 week. That's an incredible jump in efficiency. Does the research suggest what that kind of speed means for, decision making in the heat of conflict? And does it raise questions about meaningful human oversight when things move that fast? And on that note, Lavender sounds even more targeted.
It is more targeted, yes. Lavender is described as an AI-powered database. It essentially holds a list compiled by AI of tens of thousands of Palestinian men. Men the AI has linked somehow to Hamas or Palestinian Islamic Jihad, its main job. Identify, select, and track these individuals for assassination. And the key point here, according to the research, is that it operates with very minimal human oversight. The scale and the speed of that kind of targeting, that's what's really impactful.
Minimal human oversight.
Yeah.
And then, where's Daddy? I mean, the name alone suggests something quite specific and maybe chilling.
Yeah, the name is evocative. Where's Daddy is reportedly designed to track these identified targets, specifically to their homes. And the research suggests that just finding the target at home is often considered enough confirmation of identity, which can, and apparently does, lead to strikes on family homes, residences. Taken together, these coordinated AI systems, Gospel, Lavender, Where's Daddy? The research indicates they've enabled what some experts are calling the most devastating bombardment campaign of the 21st century.
Devastating. And beyond these specific systems, the research also points to partnerships, right? With major U.S. tech companies boosting Israel's AI power. What does that actually look like? What kind of tech are we talking about?
Right. So what the documentation shows is that commercial cloud platforms like Microsoft's Azure and even AI models from companies like OpenAI have been integrated into Israeli military operations. And the usage apparently spiked nearly 200 times higher right after the October 7th attacks in 2023. So the Israeli military is using these commercial AI tools to process just enormous amounts of data, intercepted calls, surveillance feeds, you name it, looking for suspicious patterns, tracking movements. Microsoft has confirmed they provide these cloud services, though they do add that they don't, necessarily see how customers use the software on their own systems.
Okay. So bit of a distance there. And what about surveillance? Beyond targeting and intelligence analysis?
Yeah, the research also points to widespread use of facial recognition across Gaza using tech from an Israeli company, Coresight, and apparently even Google Photos. These systems are reportedly gathering and cataloging Palestinian faces, often without people knowing or consenting. It points to a really pervasive level of AI-driven surveillance on the ground.
That's a complex picture for sure.
Oh,
Hey, so we've looked at Israel's use of AI, but our research also highlights Iran making its own big investments in military AI. What are they doing specifically? How's AI being built into their capabilities?
yeah, Iran is definitely active. They're not standing still. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC Navy specifically, has reportedly developed something like 2,600 pieces of AI-enhanced equipment, things like advanced missiles and drones. And Iranian military leaders have actually publicly talked about having ultra-secret AI-powered weapons with supposedly exceptional capabilities. They clearly see AI, along with robotics and quantum computing, as absolutely critical for the future of warfare. They've basically said ignoring this stuff could lead to major strategic disadvantages.
So they see it as essential for staying competitive. What about cyber warfare? How does AI fit into their cyber activities?
Well, what we found indicates Iran is increasingly using AI in its cyber ops. It makes them, well, faster and more effective. For instance, after the October 7th Hamas attack, Iranian-linked cyber groups reportedly used AI tools to generate propaganda images, trying to sway public opinion in Israel. And then again, after Iran's drone strike on Israel in April 2024, these groups used AI to create fake videos and images, things showing rockets hitting targets, explosions, stuff that didn't actually happen or not like that. They pushed this out on social media to, stir up fear. It's part of what they call their forward deterrent strategy.
Wow, AI for psychological operations and disinformation on that scale, it's concerning. What about their actual missiles? You mentioned missiles earlier. Are they using AI for better accuracy?
They claim to be. The IRGC has announced they're integrating AI into missile systems, specifically to improve precision targeting. They've even made some claims about developing tech that could, quote, strike targets without harming innocents. Which suggests, an ambition at least to use AI for minimizing collateral damage. Whether that's achievable is another question, of course.
Right. Aspirations versus reality. Okay, so we can't really talk about AI in this conflict without looking at the U.S. role. Our research shows they're deeply involved both using AI themselves and supporting others. What did our notes highlight about U.S. AI applications in the region?
Well, the documentation we reviewed shows that U.S. Central Command, CENTCOM, is actively using machine learning, using it to identify targets. For example, in just 1 month, February 2024, AI algorithms informed over 85 airstrikes in Iraq and Syria. These systems, developed under something called Project Maven, use computer vision. They analyze satellite images, other data sources, to find and identify potential targets. This tech has apparently been used to spot things like rocket launchers in Yemen or boats in the Red Sea, many of which were then targeted and destroyed.
So the U.S. is directly using AI for targeting in its own operations there. And how does this link back to their support for Israel, beyond the tech company involvement we already discussed?
Right, so the research really emphasizes that connection. It points out that U.S. tech companies like Microsoft, OpenAI, the ones we mentioned, have quietly provided these sort of foundational infrastructure, the cloud services, the commercial AI models, that have really enabled Israel's expanded military operations. And this is noted as a really significant development. It's seen as the first confirmed case where commercial AI models made in the U.S. are being used directly in active warfare, which naturally raises some big questions about Silicon Valley's role in conflict now. And there's also mention of a partnership between Israeli military intelligence and U.S. tech reservists, people from companies like Meta, Google, Microsoft, which blurs those lines even further.
Okay, this is where the research really pivots in a fascinating way. Because despite all this focus on military uses, which are obviously significant, our research also found some incredible humanitarian applications of AI. Right there, the same conflict zones. It's almost like the flip side of the coin. What are some of those examples?
It's a really important contrast, isn't it? Can this same technology that enables destruction also be a force for good? And the research suggests, yes, there's definitely promise there. In healthcare, for instance, AI diagnostic tools are being used to read x-rays. This is happening in places where there just aren't enough doctors or radiologists. Maybe they've left or facilities are damaged. So the AI is stepping in, compensating for that lack of human expertise, and showing pretty good accuracy, too.
That's huge, especially when healthcare systems are collapsing. What about helping people who've been displaced? That's a massive problem.
Yeah, absolutely. There are platforms emerging like one called Eureka. It's described as a multilingual AI system, and it's designed to give refugees personalized help through the whole incredibly complicated process of settling somewhere new or just navigating aid systems. It offers tailored advice, trying to, reduce the stress and confusion, making sure people get the right info at the right time.
That can make a real difference. And what about managing the emergency response itself, beyond just healthcare?
Well, the research mentions the UAE's National Emergency Crisis and Disaster Management Authority. They've developed an AI platform specifically for humanitarian aid, medical response, and general emergency management. It uses things like computer vision, machine learning, geospatial tools, all to share information in real time and help coordinate different services much better. So ultimately, it's about getting aid delivered more efficiently and effectively.
Because we have these powerful military applications and
Yeah.
these promising humanitarian ones, but given everything we've discussed, the research we looked at also flags some major challenges, especially for things like international law. It really feels like the tech is just racing ahead of the rules. What are the big ethical and legal worries here?
You're absolutely right. The speed of this AI deployment is creating, well, unprecedented challenges for international humanitarian law, or IHL. Critics, as the research points out, argue these AI systems, particularly the ones used for targeting, like in Israel, they put civilians at greater risk, they make accountability really fuzzy, and they can potentially lead to disproportionate harm. That core principle of IHL, distinction telling fighters apart from civilians, that gets really difficult. Maybe because the AI works too fast for proper human checks, or maybe because of biases baked into the algorithms. And there are real concerns about bias, especially when you see UN reports stating that the majority killed in Gaza have been women and children.
That principle of distinction seems key. And what about the black box problem? That term came up in the research. It sounds like a major hurdle for understanding these systems.
It's a huge hurdle. That's a critical issue identified in the research. See, many AI algorithms are inherently opaque. They're like a black box. It's incredibly hard, sometimes impossible, to know exactly why the AI made a specific decision, like recommending a target. And that lack of transparency, that explainability gap, makes holding anyone accountable really, really difficult. It potentially undermines compliance with the law because you can't scrutinize the decision-making process. And if you have fully autonomous weapons in the future, trying to figure out the why after the fact, almost impossible. So maintaining meaningful human control over lethal force decisions remains this central kind of unresolved issue.
Yeah, when you throw in commercial tech companies, whose AI models might be used in ways they didn't originally design them for.
Yeah.
Who's responsible then? The lines seem incredibly blurry.
Exactly. That's precisely the problem the research highlights. When AI systems are influencing life and death targeting decisions, figuring out who is legally responsible if something goes wrong, if laws are violated, becomes very complex. You have the military users, the commanders, the AI developers, the companies providing the underlying tech. The involvement of these private tech companies creates new accountability gaps that our current legal frameworks just weren't built to handle. It's uncharted territory.
Looking ahead then, what does the research suggest is coming next? It mentioned things like swarm technologies and cognitive warfare. What should we understand about those?
Right, emerging trends. So military experts, according to the research, are predicting that autonomous drone swarms, they could be the new face of warfare. Imagine groups of drones acting together, like a flock of birds or swarm of insects, but coordinated. They can react really quickly to changes on the battlefield, work as a team, and while that offers tactical advantages speed, overwhelming defenses the research flags major ethical concerns, especially around algorithmic decision-making in lethal situations when they operate with high degrees of autonomy.
Okay, drone swarms and cognitive warfare. That sounds almost like a battle for hearts and minds, but weaponized with AI.
That's a good way to put it. The research describes it as potentially control of the brain. It's about influencing or manipulating an adversary's perceptions, their understanding, their decision-making process itself. And AI is seen as a key enabler here. Think about using AI to generate and spread disinformation or propaganda incredibly rapidly and effectively, tailored to specific audiences. Social media becomes a primary battlefield. The psychological impact of this kind of AI-driven information warfare could be just as damaging as traditional kinetic attacks, maybe even more insidious.
So we have drone swarms, cognitive warfare, all these rapid changes. How's the international community keeping up? Are there efforts to regulate this?
Well, the research suggests the pace of development is largely outstripping regulation. The UN, for example, has called for rules. They've set a deadline, 2026, for countries to come up with something clear. But actual progress on, legally binding international treaties, it's been slow. Many countries are hesitant to limit their own technological edge. So the consensus seems to be that the window to put meaningful controls in place, well, it's closing fast.
It sounds less like coordinated regulation and more like, well, a global AI arms race. Is that the picture that research paints?
That's definitely the context described. It's a highly competitive environment. You have major powers all pushing ahead. China's PLA is reportedly using AI to find weaknesses in U.S. systems. Russia's developing AI for electronic warfare, jamming signals. And this competition drives innovation, often without the ethical or legal frameworks keeping pace. Plus, you have that blurring of lines we talked about, commercial AI getting pulled into military uses, which adds another layer of complexity regarding corporate responsibility.
Okay, let's try to end on a slightly more constructive note. Our research did also touch on how AI could potentially be used for reconstruction and recovery after conflict. There's a glimmer of hope there, maybe.
Yes, definitely. The research does highlight that potential. It mentions the Palestinian tech sector, for instance, which was apparently growing before the current conflict. And leaders there see AI and tech work generally as a possible gateway to earning a meaningful income and living in dignity. So, potential for economic recovery. AI is also being looked at for practical post-conflict tasks, like assessing damage to buildings and infrastructure using satellite imagery and AI analysis, or monitoring reconstruction efforts, like the Gaza reconstruction mechanism, using AI to track building materials, make sure resources are used properly. So it really underscores that AI isn't just about conflict. It could play a role, a positive one, in rebuilding communities afterwards.
What an absolutely incredible and honestly quite sobering deep dive. This topic really gets to the heart of modern warfare and its complex, sometimes contradictory relationship with us, with humanity. It seems so clear that AI is this incredibly powerful double-edged sword, capable of unprecedented destruction, but also, as we just heard, holding potential for humanitarian aid and recovery.
I think this deep dive really lays bare the choices we're facing right now. The decisions made today about how AI is used in the military. They'll really shape whether this powerful tech ultimately protects people or puts civilians at even greater risk. That need for international rules, for frameworks that try to balance military needs with protecting human life, it's never felt more urgent, has it?
It really hasn't. This whole conversation around AI and conflict, it's obviously far from over. Its impact is going to shape our world for decades. As you, our listener, reflect on everything we've covered today, what's the one thing that really stands out to you from this deep dive? We really hope exploring the research like this gave you a clearer, maybe more nuanced understanding of AI's many roles in this incredibly complex situation. If you found this deep dive useful, maybe learned something new, please do share it with someone else who might find it interesting. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to NoteLab Mode wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss our next exploration. And a big thank you again to our sponsor, cloudfit.ai. Remember to visit cloudfit.ai. That's CLOUTFOT.ai to see how they're changing the game for influencer marketing and helping businesses connect with customers. We'll be back soon with another deep dive into the research behind your most pressing questions.